Jake Morrison sat in his usual chair at the Galactic Council meeting. The big room was full of noise as always. Aliens from different worlds talked and argued about trade deals and space routes. Jake had been Earth's main representative for 8 years now. He knew every face in the room, every voice, every way these aliens liked to do business. Out his personal device buzzed quietly. A message appeared on the screen. Jake read it once, then read it again. His face went white. The message was short and came from Earth Command with the highest security code possible. Operation Silent Return is now active. All human personnel are to cease current activities immediately and return to human space. No explanations to be given. This directive is final. Jake stared at the words for a long moment. Around him, the aliens continued their heated discussion about mining rights on some distant planet. Nobody noticed that the human ambassador had gone completely still. He stood up slowly and began putting his papers into his briefcase. The movement caught the attention of Zefkar, the tall, crystal-like alien who ran the council meetings. "Ambassador Morrison, where are you going?" "We are in the middle of Vote 7742B about trade sanctions against the Outer Rim worlds," Zefkar called out. His voice sounded like wind chimes in a storm. Jake stopped packing for a moment. He looked around the room at all the alien faces staring at him. These beings had worked with humans for 37 years. They had shared technology, traded goods, and built a galaxy-wide government together. Some of them he even considered friends, but the order was clear. No explanations. Jake picked up his briefcase and walked toward the door. Behind him, he heard Lisa Parker, Dan Kelly, and Alex Turner doing the same thing. The other human representatives were following his lead without even being told. "Ambassador Morrison, this is highly irregular. You cannot simply leave during an active vote." Zefkar's voice grew sharper. Jake reached the door and turned around one last time. He looked at each alien face, memorizing them. Then he walked out without saying a single word. The council chamber erupted in confused chatter. Behind him, 3 hours later, similar scenes happened all across the galaxy. On Kepler Station, the massive space platform that provided power to 3 whole star systems, Chief Engineer Amy Brooks received the same message. She was in the middle of adjusting the fusion reactors when her device buzzed. "Amy, read the message." Twice, just like Jake had done. She looked around the control room at her alien coworkers. The blue-skinned Altarians were monitoring energy flow. The insect-like Zephyrians were checking safety systems. They all depended on her to keep the reactors running smoothly. Without saying anything, Amy began shutting down the systems she was working on. She logged out of her computer, gathered her personal tools, and headed for the door. "Amy, where are you going?" "The power grid needs adjustment in Sector 7, called out Clicks, one of the Zephyrian engineers. Amy kept walking. Behind her, she could hear the confusion in the alien voices as they tried to understand what was happening. On the mining world of Zarian 7, Foreman Carl Stone was deep underground when he got the message. He was overseeing the extraction of rare metals that would be used to build new starships. The alien workers looked to him for guidance on the complex mining equipment. Carl read the message on his dirty tablet screen. Around him, the mining machines hummed with activity. Tons of valuable ore moved through conveyor systems that he had helped design. The whole operation would produce enough materials to build 50 new spacecraft. He turned off his tablet and began walking toward the surface. The alien miners called after him, asking questions he could not answer. Carl ignored them and kept walking. Captain Nick Powell was piloting his cargo ship, New Horizon, through hyperspace when the message reached him. He was carrying medical supplies to a colony world where thousands of sick aliens were waiting for treatment. The supplies in his cargo hold could save many lives. Nick read the message and immediately began changing course. His ship turned away from the colony world and headed toward the nearest human space station. In his cargo hold, the medical supplies that could have saved lives sat unused. Dr. Kate Lewis was working in her laboratory on the research station Omega Prime when she received the message. She was close to a breakthrough on a new type of medicine that could help several alien species fight off a dangerous disease. Her research team of mixed humans and aliens had worked for 3 years on this project. Kate saved her work to a secure human database, deleted everything from the station's main computer, and packed up her research notes. Her alien colleagues watched in confusion as she prepared to leave. "Dr. Lewis, we are so close to finishing the cure." "Where are you going?" asked Dr. Vixtall, her crystalline research partner. Kate looked at the alien scientist who had become a good friend over the years. She wanted to explain, but the orders were clear. No explanations. She picked up her bags and left the laboratory. All across the galaxy, humans were leaving their jobs, their homes, their lives among the aliens. They left behind important projects, valuable equipment, and confused alien friends. But they all followed the same pattern. No explanations, no goodbyes, just silent departure. On the trade world of Commerce Central, human businessman Bob Turner closed down his shipping company that employed over 10,000 aliens. The company handled transport for hundreds of worlds. Without warning, all the ships stopped flying and all the warehouses closed. Human teacher Mary Johnson left her classroom full of young alien students who were learning about Earth history and human culture. The students waited for her to return, but she never came back. Engineer Paul Davis abandoned the construction site where he was building a new type of space elevator. The project was half finished and would have revolutionized transportation for an entire star system. The alien construction workers stood around the empty site, not knowing how to continue without human guidance. News of the human departures spread quickly through galactic communication networks. At first, many aliens thought it was some kind of mistake or misunderstanding. Humans had been reliable partners for decades. They had never acted like this before, but as more reports came in from across the galaxy, the truth became clear. This was not a mistake. Every human in galactic space was leaving at the same time. They were abandoning everything they had built and returning to human territory. The strangest part was the silence. Humans were not making demands or complaints. They were not angry or upset. They simply stopped what they were doing and went home. No one could understand why. Back on the main council station, Seth Carr called an emergency meeting. Representatives from dozens of alien species gathered to discuss the crisis. But something felt wrong about the meeting. The room seemed different. Somehow. It took them a while to realize what was missing. For 37 years, humans had been part of every important discussion. Their voices had been part of every debate. Their ideas had shaped every major decision. Now the room felt empty without them. The aliens tried to contact Earth and the human colonies, but got only polite automated responses saying that humanity was withdrawing from all galactic affairs. No reasons were given. No demands were made. The humans were simply leaving, and they would not say why. As the first day of human silence ended, the aliens began to realize that something very important had just happened. They did not yet understand what they had lost, but they would learn soon enough. 3 weeks had passed since the humans left. The galaxy was trying to continue as normal, but small problems were starting to appear everywhere. At first, the alien leaders thought these were just minor issues that would fix themselves in time. They were wrong. The first big problem happened at the Vegan Trade Center, the biggest marketplace in the galaxy. The massive computer system that controlled all buying and selling across 40 star systems suddenly stopped working properly. Red warning lights flashed on screens throughout the control room. Chief Operator Zixmo, a green-skinned Altarian, stared at the error messages filling his screen. The trading system was making crazy decisions. It was trying to sell ice to ice worlds and sending food to places that only ate rocks. The computer seemed to have lost its mind. "Get me the programming team." Zixmal ordered his assistant. The programming team arrived and looked at the code. They had been trained to operate the system, but they had never really understood how it worked. The system had been designed 5 years ago by a human programmer named Kate Lewis. She had built special thinking programs into the computer that could adapt to new situations. But now Kate was gone, and her smart programs were facing problems they had never seen before. Without human guidance, the computer was making wild guesses about what to do. It was getting everything wrong. "Can we fix it?" asked Zixmal. The lead programmer, a crystallite being named Tekvar, shook his head. Slowly. "We know how to use the system, but we do not understand how it thinks. The human who made it put something special inside that we cannot see or understand." On the medical world of Sanctuary Prime, Dr. Yilta was facing a different crisis. The medical robots that had been saving thousands of lives every day were shutting down one by one. These tiny machines lived inside sick patients and fixed their bodies from the inside. They had been a miracle of human technology. The robots were programmed to work for only short periods. Before needing new instructions from their creator, Dr. Ryan Mitchell had designed them this way for safety. Every week, he would send new codes. That told the robots how to handle different diseases and problems. But Dr. Mitchell was gone now, and no new codes were coming. One by one, the medical robots were going to sleep inside their patients. People who had been healthy were getting sick again. Diseases that had been cured were coming back. Dr. Yilta tried everything she could think of. She contacted other medical centers, but they all had the same problem. The humans who understood the medical robots were all gone. The aliens who had watched them work had never learned the deep knowledge needed to keep the machines running. "How many patients will we lose?" asked Dr. Yilta's assistant. "All of them," she replied quietly. "Without the medical robots, we cannot treat the diseases they were controlling. We will have to go back to the old ways of medicine, but those treatments are much weaker." On the farming world of Harvest Prime, Farmer Colton was discovering his own problems. The automatic farming machines that had been growing food for dozens of worlds were producing crops that tasted wrong and made people sick. The plants looked healthy, but something was very wrong with them. The farming system had been designed by a human scientist named Helen White. She had created machines that could test the soil and adjust what the plants needed to grow properly. But the machines were getting confused readings from their sensors. Coltan called in soil experts from 3 different worlds, but none of them could figure out what was wrong. The machines were following their programs exactly, but the programs were not working anymore. "The soil sensors say the ground needs more nitrogen, but also less nitrogen at the same time," explained one expert. "The readings do not make sense." What they did not understand was that Helen White had programmed the machines to think like she did. The computers were supposed to make small judgments about which sensor readings to trust and which ones to ignore. But only Helen had known how to teach machines to make those kinds of decisions. Without her special knowledge, the farming machines were believing all their sensors equally, even when the sensors disagreed with each other. The result was food that looked good, but was dangerous to eat. Captain Vrok was having his own problems with space travel. His cargo ship had been flying the same route for 10 years, carrying goods between star systems. The route used special engines designed by a human engineer named Steve Garcia. These engines could jump through space faster than normal engines, but they needed very careful handling. Captain Vrok had learned to push the right buttons and pull the right levers, but he had never understood the science behind how the engines worked. Now, the engines were making strange noises and moving the ship in wrong directions. The jump, calculations that used to work perfectly, were sending ships to empty space instead of their destinations. Some ships were getting lost completely. Captain Vrogtol tried to contact the engine manufacturer, but they told him the same thing he was hearing everywhere else. The humans who designed the engines were gone, and nobody else fully understood how they worked. "We can tell you which buttons to push," said the manufacturer's representative, "but we cannot tell you why those buttons work or what to do when they stop working." The galactic communication network was also starting to fail. Messages that should have traveled across the galaxy in seconds or taking hours or days to arrive. Some messages were arriving completely scrambled, saying things that made no sense. The network used a special quantum technology that connected all the worlds instantly. But the technology needed constant small adjustments to work properly. The alien technicians had learned to make some adjustments, but they had always relied on human experts to handle the really difficult problems. Engineer Bixtal was trying to fix a communication relay station when he discovered the real problem. A human-designed quantum systems were not just machines that followed simple rules. They were complex systems that needed someone to understand them deeply enough to make creative decisions about how to fix unexpected problems. The humans did not just build these machines, Bixtal explained to his team. They built machines that needed human thinking to work properly. Without humans to guide them, the machines are losing their ability to function. On dozens of worlds, similar discoveries were being made. The asteroid mining platforms that supplied raw materials to the galaxy were drifting off course without human navigation experts. The defensive systems that protected major cities were shutting down without human tactical advisors. The transportation networks that moved millions of beings every day are breaking down without human logistics coordinators. At first, the alien leaders tried to find quick fixes for these problems. They hired new workers and brought in emergency repair teams. But every solution they tried only revealed how much they had depended on human knowledge and skills. The humans had not just worked alongside alien technology. They had become part of the technology itself. Their creative thinking, their ability to solve unexpected problems, and their skill at making complex systems work together had become invisible parts of galactic civilization. Now that the humans were gone, the aliens were discovering that their advanced galactic society was like a beautiful building built on a foundation they could not see. The foundation was cracking, and cracks were spreading throughout everything they had built together. The worst part was the silence. The humans were not responding to any messages asking for help. They were not making demands or asking for anything in return for coming back. They had simply left, and they were staying gone. As the problems grew worse each day, some aliens began to suspect that this crisis was just the beginning. If small systems were failing after only 3 weeks, what would happen to the bigger, more important systems that kept their civilization running? What would happen when the really critical systems started to break down? They would not have to wait long to find out. 6 weeks had passed since the humans left, and the galaxy was falling apart. What had started as small problems was now becoming a complete disaster. Systems that had worked perfectly for decades were breaking down everywhere. The aliens were starting to panic. Commander Zektar of the Galactic Communication Network stood in his control room, watching dozens of red warning lights flash on the main display. Messages were taking days to travel between star systems that used to be connected. In seconds. Worse, many messages were arriving completely wrong, with words mixed up or changed into nonsense. "Sir, we have lost contact with the entire outer spiral region," reported his assistant. "The quantum communication relays are producing random noise instead of actual messages." Zektar had called in the best technicians from across the galaxy, but none of them could fix the problem. The communication system had been built using human quantum technology, and it needed constant tiny adjustments to work properly. The humans had made these adjustments so smoothly that the aliens never realized how much work was involved. "The quantum entanglement fields are becoming unstable," explained Chief Technician Mulver. We know how to replace broken parts, but we do not understand how to keep the quantum fields working together. The humans had some special knowledge about this that they never wrote down in the instruction books. Without proper communication, the galactic government was starting to break down. Planets could not talk to each other. Trade deals were impossible to make. Military fleets could not coordinate their movements. The galaxy was becoming a collection of isolated worlds instead of a connected civilization dot far across the galaxy. The mining operations were facing an even worse crisis. The asteroid mining platforms that had supplied raw materials to 200 industrial worlds were now floating dead in space. These massive machines had been designed by human engineer Monica Taylor to harvest metals and rare elements from space rocks. Mine, Supervisor Kick Stahl, floated in his spacesuit next to one of the broken platforms. The machine was as big as a city, but it was completely silent and dark. Around him, dozens of other platforms drifted helplessly through the asteroid field. What happened to them? Asked his assistant through the radio. Kickstal checked his readings again. The navigation systems stopped working. The platforms were supposed to move automatically from asteroid to asteroid, mining the valuable materials. But something went wrong with their calculations, and now they are all lost. The truth was more complicated than Kickstal understood. The mining platforms had been designed to make thousands of small decisions every day about which asteroids to mine, how to approach them safely, and how to avoid collisions with other objects in space. These decisions required the kind of flexible thinking that only humans seemed to understand without human oversight. The platforms had tried to follow their basic programming, but they could not adapt when unexpected situations arose. When the gravitational fields of nearby stars caused the asteroids to drift in new directions, the platforms could not figure out how to adjust their plans. One by one, they had become confused and shut down to avoid causing accidents. Now the platforms were drifting into shipping lanes, creating dangerous obstacles for other spacecraft. Several cargo ships had already been damaged trying to avoid the floating mining equipment. The asteroid belt that had once been a source of wealth was becoming a navigation nightmare. The military was facing its own disaster. Admiral Krixmol of the Zephyrian Defense Fleet stood on the bridge of his flagship, staring at screens full of error messages. His advanced warships, some of the most powerful vessels in the galaxy, were essentially flying blind. Admiral, the tactical computer. Systems are not responding to commands, reported his weapons officer. They keep asking for something called an intuition update. Admiral Krixmol had heard of intuition updates before, but he had always thought they were automatic. The tactical systems had been programmed by a human military expert named Chris Adams, who specialized in battle strategy. The computers were designed to help commanders make quick decisions during combat. But now, Admiral Krixmol was learning that the tactical computers had never been fully automatic. They had been designed to work together with human thinking. The computers could calculate odds and analyze enemy movements, but they needed human intuition to understand which calculations were most important in real battle situations. Without human guidance, the tactical computers were becoming paralyzed by too much information. They could tell the Admiral that the enemy had a 47.3% chance of attacking from the left and a 52.7% chance of attacking from the right, but they could not tell him which attack was more dangerous or how he should respond. "Sir, what should we do?" asked his second-in-command. Admiral Krixmol looked at his fleet of powerful but helpless warships. "Send a message to all ships. We are returning to base until these systems can be repaired. We cannot fight effectively without working computers." On the civilian worlds, the food crisis was getting worse every day. The transportation networks that moved food from farming worlds to city worlds were completely broken. The logistics systems that had once efficiently delivered the right food to the right places at the right times were now sending strange and useless shipments everywhere. On the city world of Metro Prime, Governor Yul Carr stood in an enormous warehouse full of ice cream that was supposed to be medicine. The automatic shipping system had somehow decided that the hospitals needed frozen desserts instead of antibiotics. How did this happen? Governor Yul Carr asked the shipping coordinator. The logistics computer system is making decisions that do not make sense, the coordinator explained. Yesterday, it sent 1 million tons of sand to the water world of Aqua 7. Today, it is trying to deliver swimming pools to the desert world of dry rock. The logistics systems had been created by human analyst Julia Stevens, who had spent years teaching computers how to predict what different worlds would need and when they would need it. But her systems had been designed to learn and adapt based on human feedback about whether their decisions were good or bad, without humans to guide them. The computers were making increasingly wild guesses about what to ship where. They had no way to understand that ice cream was not medicine or that desert worlds did not need swimming pools. Even worse, some worlds were receiving no food at all, while others were receiving too much of the wrong kinds of food. Planets that needed grain were getting only meat. Worlds that could only digest plant food were receiving shipments of fish. The result was widespread hunger and waste across hundreds of worlds. Back at the Galactic Council Station, the government was discovering its own problems. The universal translation system that allowed different alien species to understand each other was starting to produce very strange translations. During an important meeting about the crisis, Councillor Vreektoth tried to say, "We need to find a solution quickly," but the translation system converted it to, "We need to find a fish costume Tuesday." Other council members heard similarly ridiculous translations of important statements. The translation system had been fine-tuned over many years by human linguist Ben Cooper, who understood how different alien languages expressed ideas and emotions. The computer could translate words, but it needed human understanding of culture and context to translate meaning. Without Ben's guidance, the translation system was becoming more confused every day as it encountered new words and situations it had never seen before. Political discussions were becoming impossible, as council members could not understand what each other were actually trying to say, that the power grids that supplied energy to major worlds were also beginning to fail. The fusion reactors that had been maintained by humans were experiencing problems that the alien technicians could not solve. Some reactors were producing too much power, while others were not producing enough. On the industrial world of Factory Central, Chief Engineer Lixdown watched helplessly as the main power plant began shutting itself down. The reactor's safety systems were activating because the computer could not understand whether the reactor was running safely or not. The reactor computer keeps asking for human authorization codes, Lixdan explained to his emergency team. It will not accept our alien codes, but we do not have any human codes to give it. The reactor had been designed with multiple safety systems that required both alien and human approval for major operations. This had seemed like a good idea when it was built, but now it meant that the reactor could not function without human participation. As power plants shut down across the galaxy, cities went dark and factories stopped working. The carefully balanced energy networks that had powered galactic civilization for decades were collapsing because they had been designed to require human oversight that was no longer available. By the end of the 6th week, it was clear that this was not just a temporary problem. The humans had not simply worked alongside alien technology. They had become an essential part of how that technology functioned. Without them, the complex systems that supported galactic civilization were breaking down in ways that the aliens could not predict or prevent. The galaxy was learning a hard lesson about dependence and partnership. They had thought the humans were just helpful allies. 2 months had passed since the humans left, and the galaxy was in chaos. What had once been a proud galactic civilization was now a collection of struggling worlds barely able to take care of themselves. The Galactic Council called an emergency. Meeting, but getting everyone together, was harder than ever before. Councillor Vreektoff of the hegemony sat in the half-empty council chamber. Many delegates could not attend because the transportation systems had failed. Those who did make it had to use old, slow ships that took weeks to travel distances that used to take days. The chamber itself looked different. Lights flickered on and off randomly. The air recycling system made strange noises. Even the seats were uncomfortable because the automatic adjustment systems no longer worked properly. "We are in serious trouble," Vreektoff said to the assembled delegates. His words came through the broken translation system as "we are in serious bubbles," but everyone understood what he meant. "How did this happen so quickly?" asked Councillor Meltar of the Trade Federation. "We have been a successful galactic civilization for hundreds of years. How can everything fall apart in just 2 months?" Vreektoff had been thinking about this question for weeks. He had ordered his staff to research everything the humans had been involved in over the past 50 years. What they found was shocking. "We never realized how much we depended on them," Vreektoff said quietly. The room fell silent. It was the first time anyone had spoken the truth that everyone was thinking. Ambassador Kelter of the Crystalline Assembly stood up slowly. She had been one of the aliens who worked most closely with humans over the years. "I have been reviewing the records," she said. "In the past 50 years, humans have been involved in designing, building, or maintaining 73% of our critical infrastructure." The number hit the room like a physical blow. 73%. That meant almost 3/4 of everything that kept their civilization running had human involvement. "But that cannot be right," protested General Kixmo of the Defense Corps. Humans were only 12% of the galactic population. How could such a small group be responsible for so much? Keltar activated a holographic display that showed the data her team had collected. "Look at the evidence. Our communication networks use human quantum technology. Our transportation systems use human faster-than-light engines. Our medical systems use human biotechnology. Our food distribution uses human logistics software. Our power plants use human fusion designs." The list went on and on. As each item appeared on the display, the delegates realized how completely their civilization had become dependent on human knowledge and skills. "We thought we understood these technologies because we could operate them," continued Kelter. "But operating something and truly understanding it are very different things." Dr. Zixala, the lead scientist from the Altarian Research Institute, nodded sadly. "We spent decades studying human technology, thinking we were learning how it worked. But we were just learning to use their inventions. We never learned to think the way they think." This was perhaps the most painful realization of all. The aliens had assumed that technology was just about building the right machines and writing the right computer programs. But human technology was different. It required a way of thinking that seemed to be uniquely human. "What makes human thinking so special?" asked Councillor Brickstar of the Outer Colonies. Dr. Zixala had been studying this question intensively. "Humans have something we call adaptive creativity. When they encounter a problem they have never seen before, they can quickly come up with new solutions. When their technology faces unexpected situations, they can modify it on the spot to handle new challenges." She paused and looked around the room. "We aliens are very good at following rules and procedures. We can learn to operate complex systems perfectly. But when those systems encounter something unexpected, we become confused. Humans seem to handle the unexpected naturally." The economic data was equally devastating. Trade Coordinator Velkin had been analyzing the financial impact of the human departure. "The economic numbers are terrible," he reported. 60% of the most successful businesses in the galaxy were either run by humans or used human-designed business methods. "How is that possible?" asked Councillor Yitmar. "There were many alien businesses, too." "Yes, but the human businesses were different," Velkin explained. They grew faster, adapted to changes better, and made more profit than alien businesses. They seemed to understand market trends in ways that we could not copy. The truth was that human businesses had succeeded because they used the same adaptive creativity that made human technology work. Human business leaders could sense changes in the market before they showed up in official reports. They could predict what customers would want before the customers knew it themselves. They could find opportunities in situations that looked like disasters to everyone else. The humans were not just participants in our economy, Velkin continued. They were the engines that drove economic growth across the galaxy. Their businesses created jobs for billions of aliens. Their innovations opened up new markets and new possibilities. Without them, our economy is not just smaller, it is fundamentally different and much weaker. Military Commander Zeke-Tol had his own disturbing report. Our defense capabilities have been reduced by 80%, he announced. Not because our weapons are broken, but because we cannot use them effectively without human tactical support. Explain, demanded General Kixmal. Human military advisors did not just help us plan battles, Zeke-Tol said. They helped us understand how to think about warfare itself. They could see patterns in enemy behavior that we missed. They could predict how battles would develop in ways that our computers could not calculate. Are you saying that humans were better at war than we were? Asked General Kixmal, clearly offended. No, replied Zeke-Tol. I am saying that humans were better at understanding war. They did not just follow military procedures. They understood why those procedures worked and when to break the rules. Without that understanding, our military is just a collection of powerful weapons that we do not know how to use properly. The delegates sat in stunned silence as the full scope of their dependence became clear. It was not just that humans had built important things for them. Humans had become the thinking component of their entire civilization. Counselor, Plytar of the agricultural worlds, asked the question that everyone was afraid to hear answered. Can we rebuild without them? Dr. Zixala looked at her data again. Before responding, some things, yes. We can learn to maintain the simpler systems that humans built. We can probably develop our own versions of some human technologies, though they will likely be less efficient. And the rest? Asked Plytar. Rest may be impossible, Dr. Zixala admitted. The most advanced human technologies were not just built by humans. They were designed to work with human thinking. Replacing them would require us to fundamentally change how we think and solve problems. That may not be possible for our species. Room erupted in frightened chatter as the implications sank in. They were not just facing a temporary crisis that could be fixed with time and effort. They were facing the possibility that their advanced galactic civilization could not exist without human participation. We have to contact them, declared Counselor Vraektoth. We have to convince them to come back. We have tried, replied Communications. Director Lixmal. We have sent thousands of messages to Earth and the human colonies. They respond politely, but firmly. They say that humanity has withdrawn from galactic affairs and wishes us well in our future endeavors. What about negotiations? What about offers of better treatment or more resources? Asked Ambassador Kelter. They are not making any demands, Lixmal said. They are not asking for anything. They simply say they are done with galactic civilization and want to be left alone. The silence that followed was heavy with despair. The humans were not angry. They were not trying to punish the galaxy or make demands for better treatment. They had simply decided to leave, and nothing the aliens could offer seemed likely to change their minds. There must be something we can do, whispered Counselor Meltar. But as the delegates looked around the failing council chamber, with its flickering lights and broken systems, they began to understand a terrible truth. The humans had not just been their partners in building galactic civilization. They had been the foundation that made it possible. And now that foundation was gone, and everything built on top of it was slowly crumbling away. The galaxy was learning that some kinds of dependence cannot be easily replaced. When the thing you depend on decides to leave, you discover just how much you never knew you needed them. 6 months had passed since the humans left, and the galaxy was unrecognizable. The proud Galactic Council that had once governed hundreds of worlds was now meeting in an old conference room on a backwater station. Most of the Grand Council buildings had lost power or become too dangerous to use. President Linda Hayes of the Human Federation stood in her office on Earth, reading the latest message from the aliens. It was the 300th message they had sent, each one more desperate than the last. This one came from what remained of the Galactic Council. Honored President Hayes, the message began, we humbly request an opportunity to discuss the return of human participation in galactic affairs. We are prepared to offer any terms you consider fair. Linda set down the message and looked out her window at the busy streets of New Geneva. Humans were going about their daily lives, building their own civilization, creating their own future. They seemed happier and more energetic than they had been in years. Any response, Madam President? Asked her secretary, Julie Wright. The same as always, Linda replied. Humanity withdraws from all Galactic Council affairs and agreements. We wish the galaxy well in its future endeavors. The secretary nodded and left to send the standard reply. Linda had given the same response to every alien message for 6 months. She was not being cruel or trying to punish anyone. The decision had been made carefully and was final. The truth behind humanity's departure was more complex than the aliens. Understood, it had not been a sudden decision made in anger. It had been the result of decades of careful consideration and growing frustration. For 50 years, humans had poured their creativity, their knowledge, and their energy into building a galactic civilization. They had shared their most advanced technologies freely. They had solved problems that had puzzled alien scientists for centuries. They had built the infrastructure that made interstellar civilization possible. In return, the aliens had treated humans as useful but unremarkable. Every human innovation had been copied and credited to others. Every breakthrough had been explained away as lucky accident rather than human genius. Every contribution had been minimized or forgotten within a few years. The final straw had come. 3 months before the departure, the Galactic Council had passed Resolution 7741C, which officially classified humans as a useful but unremarkable species, whose contributions to galactic civilization have been moderate at best. The resolution had been intended as a bureaucratic classification for resource allocation purposes. But to the humans, it represented the ultimate insult. After 50 years of building the foundation of galactic society, they had been officially declared unremarkable. That night, President Hayes had called an emergency meeting of the Human Defense Council. The decision to leave had been unanimous. We have given them everything, General Pete Davis had said during the meeting. Our technology, our knowledge, our creativity, our labor. And they have decided we are unremarkable. What do you recommend? President Hayes had asked. We leave, Admiral Carol Johnson had replied simply. We withdraw completely and let them discover just how unremarkable we really are. The withdrawal had been planned carefully over 3 months. Every human in galactic space had been given secret instructions on when and how to leave. The operation had been called Silent Return, and it had worked perfectly. Now, 6 months later, the results were exactly what the human leaders had predicted. Captain Pete Johnson, commander of the last human diplomatic vessel to leave Council Space, had transmitted the final message as he departed. You never asked what we wanted. You never asked how we felt. You simply assumed we would always be there to fix what was broken and solve what was impossible. Now you can learn to do those things yourselves. The message had been broadcast across the entire galaxy, and it had hurt more than any insult or threat could have. The aliens realized that it was completely true. In 50 years of partnership, they had never once asked humans what they wanted from the relationship. The aliens had treated humans as tools rather than partners. Useful tools that could solve problems and build things, but not real equals whose opinions mattered. They had taken human contributions for granted and assumed that humans would always be grateful just to be included in galactic civilization. Now, the galaxy was paying the price for that assumption. The communication networks that had once connected hundreds of worlds were mostly dead. Only a few planets could still talk to each other, and those connections were slow and unreliable. The galaxy was becoming a collection of isolated worlds again. The transportation systems had collapsed completely. Most of the faster-than-light engines had stopped working, and the aliens could not fix them. Space travel now took months instead of days. Trade between worlds had almost stopped. The medical systems that had saved millions of lives were gone. Diseases that had been conquered were coming back. Life expectancy was dropping on every world as alien doctors struggled to treat patients without human medical technology. The food distribution networks were broken beyond repair. Some worlds were starving, while others had too much food rotting in warehouses. The complex logistics that had once fed the galaxy efficiently were now chaos. The power grids that had supplied energy to major cities were failing one by one. Some worlds had reverted to older, less efficient energy sources. Others were rationing power and living in partial darkness. Most devastating of all, the economic systems that had created prosperity across the galaxy were collapsing. Without human businesses driving growth and innovation, the galactic economy was shrinking rapidly. Unemployment was rising on every world as industries that depended on human knowledge shut down. Some alien worlds tried to copy human technology and rebuild their own versions of what had been lost. But their attempts usually failed or produced systems that were much weaker than the original human designs. The problem was not just that humans had built better machines. The problem was that human technology required human thinking to work properly. The aliens could copy the hardware, but they could not copy the creative, adaptive intelligence that made the hardware useful. Dr. Zixala of the Altarian Research Institute published a paper called The Human Factor that explained why alien attempts to replace human technology were failing. Human technology was not designed to be operated by non-humans, she wrote. It was designed to work together with human intelligence. Without that intelligence, even perfect copies of human machines will eventually fail. Some alien leaders suggested sending military forces to Earth to force the humans to return. But their own military experts quickly explained why this was impossible. Our military systems depend on human technology, Admiral Crixmo explained to the Defense Council. Our ships cannot travel far enough to reach Earth, and even if they could, our weapons would not work properly without human tactical support. We would be sending broken ships with confused weapons against the people who designed both the ships and the weapons. A few alien worlds attempted to develop their own new technologies from scratch without any human influence. These projects showed some promise, but they were progressing very slowly. It would take decades or centuries to rebuild what had been lost, and the new systems would likely be much less capable than what the humans had provided. The irony was cruel but undeniable. The aliens had declared humans unremarkable, but they were discovering that humans had been the most remarkable species in the galaxy. Their ability to think creatively, solve unexpected problems, and build systems that could adapt to changing conditions had been so valuable that the entire galactic civilization depended on it. By the end of the first year after the human departure, the Galactic Council officially dissolved. There were not enough functioning systems left to support a galaxy-wide government. The member worlds could barely communicate with each other, let alone coordinate complex policies. Some worlds formed small regional alliances with their immediate neighbors. Others became completely isolated and focused on solving their own problems. The galaxy that had once been unified under the Council became a scattered collection of struggling civilizations. The humans, meanwhile, were thriving in their own space. Free from the burden of supporting alien civilization, they focused their energy on their own development. Human colonies grew and prospered. New human technologies advanced rapidly without having to be shared or explained to species that did not understand them. Occasionally, individual aliens would ask permission to visit human space and learn from human experts. Some of these requests were granted, but the aliens who made these visits quickly learned that human knowledge could not simply be copied. It required understanding human ways of thinking, and most aliens found this impossible. Years later, historians would call this period the Great Separation. It marked the end of galactic civilization and the beginning of separate development for different species. The galaxy learned a lesson that would be remembered for generations. Never take your partners for granted, because you never know how much you depend on them until they are gone. The humans had proven that being called unremarkable was the greatest insult possible, because without their remarkable contributions, the galaxy itself became unremarkable.